Everyone, welcome back. So I recently did the Alexandria 7 Wonders of the World kind of thing, and then this is recommended from Kings and Generals. They have 2 more 7 Wonders of the World, of the ancient worlds. So we're doing them right now. So get into the video.
Countless examples of architectural and cultural greatness in humanity's ancient past are permanently lost to the modern world, reduced to dust throughout long centuries, or destroyed in upheavals, both natural and anthropogenic in nature, or sometimes both. The 7 wonders of the ancient world are perhaps the greatest examples of such lost beauty. Located in the eastern Mediterranean, these legendary wonders have long captivated and inspired the imagination. Welcome to our video giving an overview of the 7 wonders. And what better sponsor can there be for a video on the ancient wonders of the world than Paradox and Imperator Rome? Paradox is famous for supporting its titles, and the new free update called Marius
Want to make sure
this tale and the gardens of Babylon, filling them with trees from his wife's place of origin.
Sorry.
By trying the new free update
Okay. I think I went too far.
of Babylon. Our classical sources on the Great Gardens, such as Diodorus Siculus, Strabo and Josephus, themselves drew from older writings which are now lost.
Is this the Hanging Gardens of Babylon?
In one of those vanished sources, a Babylonian priest of Marduk, known as Berossus, wrote how King Nebuchadnezzar II once wed a princess Amytis of the Median Empire. This was probably a diplomatic arrangement, and Amytis seems to have grown understandably homesick, a fact which Nebuchadnezzar attempted to remedy in spectacular fashion by constructing elevated gardens and filling them with trees from his wife's place of origin. Although widespread in many of the ancient sources, this tale and the Gardens of Babylon are almost certainly a legend without any historical basis, passed down and distorted over time. Nevertheless, it does contain the truth that ornate royal gardens were used by ancient kings to display their wealth, ability to create lush beauty within arid environments, and for luxury. A prime feature of such gardens, for example, were trees possessing leaves which sheltered people of note from the scorching sun. There is no evidence of elaborate garden constructions of this kind at Babylon. However, it is speculated by historians such as Stephanie Daly that the Hanging Gardens did exist, but not in Babylon. Instead, she began the now dominant hypothesis that they were constructed in the Neo-Assyrian capital of Nineveh by King Sennacherib, who reigned over vast swaths of the Near East from 705 to 681 BC. If these Hanging Gardens of Nineveh were indeed a reality, then their destruction would have likely come in 612 BC, the year in which Assyria's long subjugated empire rose up against it, descended on the imperial capital, and put it to utter ruin. After 2 Persian invasions in the first decades of the 5th century were defeated, the golden age of classical Greece, and particularly Athens, began in earnest. New and more sophisticated forms of culture were pioneered in this civilizational blossoming, including the iconic Greek play, philosophical concepts which remain with us today, and crucially, grander styles of architecture and sculpture. To enhance the hallowed shrine of Zeus at Olympia in the Peloponnese, the governing council there chose to build a large temple inside which an already existing image of the god existed and could be protected from the elements. However, the classical age's awe-inspiring tastes demanded something beyond a small cult object, so an exiled Athenian sculptor was hired to create an ideal image of the king of the gods, Pheidias. According to the retelling of later Roman authors, the sculptor's inspiration for this great project was Homer, and specifically verses 528 to 530 in the Iliad. In these particular passages, he talks of an austere Zeus, the movement of whose head caused the whole of Mount Olympus to shake. Using techniques developed first during his work in Athens, Pheidias completed a spectacular 42-foot tall representation of Zeus sitting on a godly throne. In his right hand, the figure holds an icon of the goddess Nike, and in the left is grasped a scepter crowned by an eagle. So huge did the work sit in its temple that if the god were to stand, it would definitely destroy its housing. For almost 1,000 years following its construction, the statue amazed and awed visitors who held Zeus divine. However, when the Roman Empire instituted Christianity as its state religion in 391, Theodosius I implemented laws which led to the sanctuary's decline. The statue itself was eventually carted off to adorn a palace in Constantinople, where it was destroyed by fire in 462 AD. Three more.
It was a granite, or it was made out of granite. Can granite be destroyed in fire? I guess if the fire's hot enough. Anything could probably be destroyed in fire.
Of the ancient wonders could be visited across the Bosphorus on Asia Minor's western coast, one of which historian Edward Gibbon described in poetic fashion. The arts of Greece and the wealth of Asia had conspired to erect that sacred and magnificent structure. Successive empires, the Persian, Macedonian, and Roman, revered its sanctity and enriched its splendor. This particular praise is reserved for none other than the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. First constructed in the 6th century BC reign of, and patronized by the prodigious wealth of, Lydian king Croesus, the temple was an intricately decorated, glittering rectangular structure surrounded by 127 beautiful 60-foot-high fluted columns in the Ionic style. To further emphasize its importance, the main platform was elevated slightly above ground level, reached by any potential suppliant by perfectly crafted marble steps. In addition to the splendor of its oriental construction, mixed with the Hellenic spirit in which it was so clearly infused, the so-called Artemisium is rightly famed for the myriad historical figures it is connected to. According to legend, King Croesus was about to be sacrificed by the soldiers of Cyrus the Great, but then the skies suddenly opened up and rain began to fall. The Persians relented and Croesus was saved. The temple's patron goddess failed utterly to intervene in a similar manner when Herostratus, who notoriously desired fame immortal by any means necessary, burned the sanctuary down in 356, supposedly on the very evening Alexander the Great was born. Plutarch justifies her absence by explaining how the goddess was dealing with just this special birth. It was tenaciously rebuilt soon after, but in the midst of Rome's imperial crisis, Ephesus's Artemisium was destroyed by piratical Gothic raiders in 262. Although it was semi-rebuilt in the respite of the early 4th century, early church father St. John Chrysostom completely leveled the pagan structure in 402. Almost exactly 100 miles south of the Grand Temple of Artemis sat the great Carian city of Halicarnassus. At that time, this Greek realm was a powerful satrapy kingdom within the Achaemenid Empire, so its ruler Mausolus was a Persian satrap as well as a monarch of his own realm. He moved his capital from the old Carian royal seat at Mylassa to the ancient harbour city of Halicarnassus, refounding it after a period of neglect. There Mausolus also wed his sister Artemisia, who along with her husband began work on a lavish tomb for the dynasty. When the Carian ruler did eventually perish in 353 BC, with the work unfinished, Artemisia ensured it was completed before her death 2 years later. Constructed using a skillful synergy of Hellenic, Persian and Egyptian architecture, this mausoleum, as it came to be known in reference to its patron, comprised a huge 440-foot circumference podium topped with Ionic columns and a pyramidal roof. Decorating the intricate work were a number of statues and reliefs, the most notable of which was one in the image of Mausolus riding a Herculean chariot placed atop the mausoleum's roof. As one of the longer-lasting ancient wonders, Mausolus's tomb remained standing proudly throughout the Macedonian and Roman empires and further into the Crusader age. Consigned to irrelevance long before, the colonnade and upper section of Mausolus's resting place was collapsed by an earthquake at some point in the early 2nd millennium. However, like so many other artifacts of the ancient past, the mausoleum was condemned to oblivion by the Crusaders. Seeking to refortify their nearby fortress at Bodrum in 1494, the Knights of St. John used a significant amount of the remaining mausoleum stone to bolster the fortifications, including a number of slabs depicting the Amazonomachy, the mythical battle between Greeks and the warrior woman Amazons. The inner chamber was also looted in the aftermath, but a number of treasures were eventually carted off to the British Museum during later excavations, where they remain to this day. To conclude our journey around the Anatolian seaboard, we go to the island of Rhodes. At the very tip, overlooking one of the great Rhodian harbours for hundreds of years, was a massive statue of the Greek sun god Helios, patron deity of the island and city. Its name, as almost everyone knows, was the Colossus of Rhodes. The great statue's history begins with Alexander the Great's death and the conflicts between the Macedonian generals and nobles known as the Diadochi Wars. This continued until a deadly, unstable balance of power began to emerge. Among those powers, the Antigonids, Antigonus I the One-Eyed and his son Demetrius, were unquestionably the most powerful, opposed by a coalition informally led by Ptolemy in Egypt. In 307, at the very zenith of Antigonus's power, Rhodes refused to join his war against Ptolemy due to economic relations with the latter, leading eventually to the siege of Rhodes by Demetrius in 305 BC. Despite Demetrius's skill, Rhodes survived the siege and then sold Demetrius's siege engines for funds to create a grand monument to their victory, the Colossus. After a significant time of preparation, Rhodes's appointed sculptor Chares of Lindos and his bronze casters constructed the giant 30-meter tall statue between 294 and 282 BC when it was finally completed. Unlike the Colossus's literary clone in Game of Thrones, the Rhodian real thing did not bestride the harbour entrance. Unfortunately, the metal and stone giant did not stand for long. In 226, it and the city in which it stood was racked by a massive earthquake, which broke Helios at the knee and sent him tumbling down, destroying many houses. Ptolemy III, ruler of Egypt at the time, offered to bankroll a restoration, but the Rhodians declined due to the ban of an oracle. So, in its collapsed state, the Colossus lay where it fell for 900 years, until the Arabs plundered it in 654 AD. Across the Mediterranean coast,
900 years it sat there? In somebody's living room? They can't watch TV now? Oh, terrible. Yeah, I always thought the Colossus was at the heart, kind of like the lighthouse of Alexandria. I always thought it was kind of like right there, like it greeted you when you came in. But it's much different in my head how it looks. I don't know. I was imagining like something like this. I don't. Still cool. Probably have. See, it's at 900 years, and then they rated it in the 600s. It's 14 plus 100 years ago. So, wow. They rated it 1400 years ago. And when they raided it, it had been laying there for 900 years. That's just crazy. It's just crazy. Do we know what happened to it? If it was metal and all that stuff, I'm sure it rusted away and just, or that it was ripped apart and used for other things.
In the primeval kingdom of Egypt, our penultimate wonder goes a long way to prove the assertion that Alexander the Great had some involvement in almost every lofty occurrence after his time. In 332 BC, during the Macedonian invasions, Alexander annexed Egypt, including the offshore island of Pharos from the Persian Empire. Marching north from the old pharaonic capital of Memphis, Alexander came across a small fishing village known as Rakotis, located on a brilliant site. As the new pharaoh of Egypt, he ordered that a mighty city be constructed there, from which he could look across the sea at his homeland. It was the first and most famous of many cities to bear the king's name, Alexandria. To accomplish the task in appropriately grandiose fashion, the king appointed his talented court architect Dinocrates of Rhodes, who eagerly got to the task. Plans for the city's layout were drawn up in the latest Hellenistic grid style developed by Hippodamus of Miletus. With those blueprints to work on, the construction of this so-called Queen of Cities began immediately. As Alexandria slowly but surely came into being under Ptolemy's supervision during the Diadochi Wars, a wealthy Ptolemaic courtier and diplomat known as Sostratus provided, at least in part, the 800 silver talents necessary to fund his city's most famous piece of artistic genius mixed with practical usage, the lighthouse or Pharos of Alexandria, named so because of the island upon which it was constructed. Just over 100 meters tall in total, the Pharos was almost certainly a three-tiered structure, decreasing in scale from bottom to top. The first was a rectangular segment of 60 meters, above which was a cylindrical tower of a further 30 meters. The weight of the upper structure was held by a similar cylinder structure within the lower tier. The lighthouse was capped with a summit, crowned by both a great beacon and statue of Zeus Soter, Zeus the Saviour. The resilient Pharos and its brilliant seaward light survived relatively intact until the later part of the first millennium AD, when it was badly damaged by a series of earthquakes. Arab traveller Ibn Battuta visited Alexandria in 1349, and according to him, Pharos was in such a bad state that it was not possible to enter it or climb up to the doorway. The final wonder on our list, Khufu's Great Pyramid, is the oldest and only one to survive. The Great Pyramid was the culmination of centuries worth of research and advancements in architecture during the Old Kingdom. Its predecessors were the rectangular mud brick mastaba and the following step pyramid, the most famous of which housed the sacred remains of 3rd dynasty pharaoh Djoser at Saqqara. Constructed by the pharaoh's vizier Imhotep, this structure was the very first to be constructed entirely out of stone. Sophisticated construction techniques and innovations continued to advance apace as the 3rd dynasty came to an end, with the notable advent of the pyramid complex, consisting of the magnificent tomb itself, adjacent mortuary temples, causeways, sphinxes, and other related buildings and tributes to the dead god-king. The second monarch to rule over the 4th dynasty, Khufu, or Cheops as his name is Hellenized, commissioned his vizier Heman to construct a royal tomb for him as well, selecting the site of Giza near the edge of the Libyan desert. His smooth-sided construct was the first and grandest pyramid to occupy the area, but far from the last. Dedicated Egyptian officials and workers undertaking corvée labor had the site leveled to provide an open section of ground for the work. Then, probably using nothing but astronomical observation, the orientation for each side was obtained. Contrary to modern expectations, this archaic method was in fact incredibly accurate, and the alignment error on each side is only a fraction of a degree. Heman oversaw the building process, a process which we're still not certain of 4,500 years later. Historians consider two main possibilities. either that the Egyptians used ramps to encircle the grand structure as it gradually rose, or that they had a long ramp stretching out into the desert, extended as necessary as the pyramid ascended. However it was done, the movement of stone blocks at minimum 5 tons in weight must have been a titanic effort. When that stone was in place, the entire pyramid was layered with uniform blocks of shimmering white limestone, giving Khufu's tomb an appropriately divine appearance. The labour of Hemon and all of his myriad technicians, engineers and workers is so enduring that 4,500 years later, we can still visit Giza and see the complex in its mostly intact state. So unfathomably ancient is the structure that an Arab proverb states that man fears time, yet time fears the pyramids. We always have more stories to tell, so make sure you are
That was very cool. I've heard about all of them. Come on. So I knew about the hanging guard. The statue of Zeus, I actually did not know about that one. This I thought was something else. No, I did not know about that one either. Yes. Never heard of Alexandria. Unless you just saw my Alexandria video, then yeah, I was joking. Pharaohs. No. Pyramids. That's not real. Pyramids aren't real. It's all fake. It's propaganda by the propaganda people. Okay, I'm going to end this here. This was good. I enjoyed it. There's another one I'm going to do, actually, another 7. So there's a thanks button on the channel. You can click it, donate. You don't have to. Much appreciated if you do. Subscribe if you aren't. That helps. Give a thumbs up if you don't want to subscribe. And if you want to be one of those people that gives a thumbs down, there's a new game that we're all trying to get into play, and it's to see who can eat more murder hornets. Just grab them by the handful and you just start shoving them down your gullet and you just start swallowing. So thumbs down and I sign you up. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night.